The desert highway stretched endlessly under the sinking orange sun, cracked and shimmering like old leather. Cars thundered past, indifferent to the world around them. On the side of that road, dust swirling around his boots, stood a teenage boy named Mason Grant, 16, skinny but wiry, his backpack ripped, his bike chain snapped clean in half. He'd been walking for miles, thumb out, hoping someone would stop. Nobody did. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. People in Iron Vale rarely stopped for strangers, not since trouble started spilling out from the biker wars that once tore through the town. But Mason wasn't afraid of bikers. His late mother had always said, "The ones who look the scariest sometimes have the kindest hearts." He just wished he could believe that still. As he kicked at a rock, a sound broke through the quiet, not the roar of an engine, but the cough of one dying. He turned. Down the dirt stretch near a closed diner, an old Harley Road King lay tipped over in the gravel, steam rising from its pipes. Beside it, an old man in a worn leather vest sat slumped against the gas pump, breathing hard, one trembling hand clutching his chest. His silver hair whipped in the wind, his tattoos faded but unmistakable, the flaming skull insignia of the hellsangels. Mason froze. Everyone in Iron Vale knew that patch. Most crossed the street when they saw it. But Mason only saw someone in pain. Mason dropped his backpack and ran. "Hey, you okay, sir?" he shouted, skidding to his knees beside the man. The old biker looked up, squinting through the dust, his eyes the color of steel. "Kid, don't come close." "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice hoarse. But he wasn't fine. His breathing was ragged, his skin pale under the desert sun. Mason ignored him, pulling a half-empty water bottle from his bag. "Drink," he said firmly, the same way his mother used to when he was sick. The old man hesitated, then took it with a shaking hand. A trickle ran down his beard as he drank.
"You're out here alone?"
Mason asked. The man gave a faint smile. "Been alone a long time, son." He tried to push himself up, but his legs gave out. Mason caught him before he hit the ground. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. The kind of understanding two people feel when they've both lost more than they can say out loud. Mason looked at the tipped Harley, its front wheel bent, the gas tank dented. "You need a doctor," he said. The old man shook his head. "Doctors stopped fixing me years ago." Mason frowned. "Then I'll fix you myself." He didn't know it yet, but those words would change both their lives forever. Mason half-carried, half-dragged the man into the shade beside the diner's awning. The biker coughed hard, clutching his ribs. "Name's Jack," he rasped finally. "Jack Cutter. Most call me Iron Jack." Mason blinked. He'd heard that name whispered in town before. An old legend among bikers, a captain in the Hells Angels who vanished years ago after a bloody turf war. Rumor said he was either dead or in prison. "You're that Iron Jack?" Mason asked quietly. The old man just smirked. "Once upon a time. Now I'm just a rusted relic with more scars than stories." Mason tore open his backpack and pulled out an old sandwich from a gas station. "You should eat," he said, offering it. Jack stared at him in disbelief. "You sure about that?" "You look like you need it more." Mason shrugged. "You look like you haven't eaten since forever." Jack took the sandwich. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of two lifetimes colliding by accident. For the first time in years, Iron Jack didn't feel invisible. And for the first time since his mother's death, Mason didn't feel alone. As dusk deepened, Mason found a way to start a small fire beside the diner, using matches from his pack. Jack leaned back, eyes flickering with the flames. "So what's your story, kid?" Mason poked the fire with a stick. "Lost my mom last year, cancer. Don't know my dad." Been bouncing between jobs, yard work, car washes, whatever keeps me fed. Jack nodded slowly, his jaw tight. A tough world for a kid your age. Mason smirked bitterly. World doesn't care how old you are, Jack chuckled. You sound like me at 16. Then he grew quiet. You said you don't know your old man? Mason shook his head. Mom never talked about him. Just said he was out there somewhere. Said he rode with people who called themselves family, but forgot what that meant. Jack's gaze flickered, his weathered hands tightening around his water bottle. Maybe he had reasons, he murmured. Mason shrugged. Doesn't matter now. Some people just leave. Jack looked away, pain crossing his face. He muttered, almost to himself, Yeah, some do. Night fell, and the desert turned cold. Jack's breath came slower, weaker. Kid, he rasped, I need one more favor. My bike, can you help me up? Mason looked at the twisted Harley and frowned. It's wrecked. I don't care, Jack growled softly. Help me sit on her one last time. Mason hesitated, but something in the man's tone told him it mattered. He pulled the heavy Harley upright, using every ounce of strength he had, and steadied it as Jack climbed on, trembling. The old man's hands rested on the handlebars, like a priest touching sacred ground. Then, with a look of grim focus, Jack reached into his vest and handed Mason a folded photograph. If I don't make it, he said quietly, you take this to the address on the back. It's family. Mason frowned, unfolding the picture. It was of a young man holding a newborn baby. The man was younger Jack. The baby had Mason's same eyes. His hands went cold. Wait, who is this kid? Jack stared into the darkness, his voice barely a whisper. You are. For a long moment the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the low whistle of the desert wind. Mason's eyes stayed locked on the photograph. The baby, the smile, the face that looked just like his in a mirror. His voice trembled. This isn't funny, old man. My dad's gone. He left before I was born. Jack looked up slowly, his grey eyes filled with something between guilt and heartbreak. He didn't leave, kid. He was pushed out. For your safety. For hers. Mason shook his head, stepping back. You're saying you're my father. That's insane. Jack didn't argue. He just nodded toward the firelight, his weathered face softening. Your mom's name was Claire. She used to wear a silver ring with a crack in the middle. Said it matched her heart. Mason froze. No one else knew about that ring. I bought that for her, Jack whispered. Before the club wars started. Before the bad choices. Before I thought walking away would keep you safe. Mason's knees gave out, and he sat in the dirt, staring at the man he thought was just a stranger. His throat burned, his chest tight. You let me grow up thinking I didn't have anyone. Jack's voice broke. And I paid for that every damn day I was gone. Before Mason could respond, a low rumble rolled through the desert night. The unmistakable growl of motorcycles in formation. Headlights appeared over the ridge, slicing through the darkness. Within minutes, a convoy of Harleys surrounded the old diner, engines idling like a living heartbeat. The sound was thunder and memory all at once. Mason stumbled to his feet, wide-eyed, as a dozen men in leather vests dismounted. Their jackets all bore the same insignia, Hellsangels Arizona chapter. The biggest of them, a bearded man with tattooed hands, stepped forward. "Boss," he called, voice breaking. "That really you?" Jack gave a faint grin. "Still kicking, Bishop." The man, Bishop, looked stunned, then furious. "We thought you were dead. You vanished after the Henderson raid. You didn't tell anyone where you went." Jack coughed hard, blood speckling his glove. "Had my reasons. Family reasons." Bishop's eyes darted to Mason. "Who's the kid?" Jack didn't answer. He just looked at Mason with a softness that told the whole truth without words. Bishop's men sprang into action, their rough hands surprisingly gentle as they lifted Jack from the Harley and laid him across a blanket. One of them pulled out a first aid kit, another grabbed water. These weren't thugs tonight. They were brothers fighting for one of their own. Mason stood back, still dazed. "You're really one of them," he muttered, half to himself. Captain!" Bishop turned to him. "Captain? Try founding chapter leader, kid. Ern Jack built this club before half these men were born. We don't leave our own behind." Jack's breathing grew shallow. "Bishop!" he rasped. "Take the boy with you. He's my blood." The men exchanged glances. Mason felt every muscle tighten. "I'm not going anywhere." But Bishop placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kid, if Jack says you're family, then you ride with us now." They loaded Jack carefully into the sidecar of one of the bikes, draped him with a club jacket, and fired up the engines. The desert lit up with red taillights as the convoy thundered into the night, Mason riding behind Bishop, the wind hitting his face like shards of memory. They rode for nearly an hour through empty desert until the glow of a compound appeared in the distance. The Angels' old clubhouse, hidden behind a chain-link fence and surrounded by faded murals of wings and fire. Inside, the air smelled of oil, smoke, and time. Mason helped them lift Jack onto a couch beneath a wall of framed photos, the club's history, frozen in snapshots. There, in one of the oldest pictures, Mason saw his mother, younger, laughing, standing beside a proud, leather-clad Jack. He sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "She told me bikers weren't bad," he whispered. "She said some of them were angels without halos." Jack smiled weakly from the couch. "She was right. We just fell a little harder than most." Bishop knelt beside him. "We called the doc, Jack. He's on his way." But Jack shook his head. "No doctors. I've been dying for years. Tonight, I just wanted to see home one more time. And make sure my son knows who he came from." Mason felt tears sting his eyes. "You had all this, a family, and you still left?" Jack reached out, gripping his hand. "Son, I didn't leave the Angels. I left the war. I wanted you to have a life that wasn't built on engines and vengeance. But I forgot something. You can't protect someone by disappearing. You protect them by showing up." The room fell silent as the old man's words lingered. Outside, the engines idled like a choir. The men stood in reverent quiet, these rough bikers who had fought, fallen, and risen again under Iron Jack's lead. The air was thick with respect and sorrow. Jack's breathing faltered, each one slower than the last. Mason clutched his hand. "Don't you dare leave again," he whispered. Jack smiled faintly, eyes glassy but calm. "Not leaving, son, just riding ahead." His hand went still. The sound of engines outside grew louder, every biker revving once, a final salute that echoed through the desert. Mason bowed his head, the tears falling freely now. Bishop stepped forward, laying Jack's worn Hell's Angels patch across his chest. "Ride free, Captain. We'll take it from here." Mason lifted the patch, tracing the faded stitching with trembling fingers. For the first time, he understood what it really meant. Not rebellion, not violence, but brotherhood, loyalty, and the kind of love that burns too bright to fade. And that night, as the convoy rolled toward the horizon, the boy who once had no one finally rode home, carrying his father's legacy stitched across his heart. When the sun rose over Ironvale, the desert shimmered gold again, the kind of morning that made yesterday feel like a dream. Mason woke to the sound of distant engines idling and voices murmuring outside. The smell of coffee and gasoline filled the clubhouse air. He sat up on the leather couch, still wearing his father's old jacket. The backpatch, faded, stitched with wings and fire, felt heavier than it looked. Bishop walked in, a mug in each hand. "Morning, kid." He handed Mason one. "Didn't think you'd sleep at all." Mason took the cup, his voice hoarse. I didn't. Bishop nodded, eyes full of understanding. Your old man was a legend. Not because he was the toughest, though yeah, he was, but because he built something that lasted. Every man here owes him their loyalty. He paused. And that means we owe you too. Mason shook his head. You don't owe me anything. He made his choices. Bishop leaned forward. And you're his last one, Mason, the one he got right. Outside, the brothers were already rolling out a long black tarp. A tribute run was coming. And in biker culture, there's only one way to honor a fallen captain, by putting rubber to road and thunder to sky. The angels lined up side by side, 30 bikes deep, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Mason stood between them, clutching his father's helmet. The air pulsed with the sound of engines, raw, living, defiant. Bishop looked at him. You ready to ride, kid? Mason hesitated. I don't even know how, Bishop grinned. Then today's your first lesson. He guided Mason onto the back of his Harley, the engine vibrating beneath them like a heartbeat. When we ride, Bishop said over the roar, we don't mourn, we celebrate. Every mile is a memory. The convoy rolled out, the rumble echoing through the desert canyons. Townsfolk came out to watch, some filming on their phones, others standing silently with hands over hearts. For years they'd feared the angels, thought of them as troublemakers, outlaws. But that morning they rode not as rebels, but as a family escorting one of their own home. The lead bike carried Iron Jack's ashes in a small metal urn strapped to the tank. Mason kept his hand on it the whole way, feeling the weight of legacy and love in equal measure. They rode for miles until the road climbed to an overlook above the desert. There Bishop killed the engine, and one by one the others followed. The sudden silence was deafening. Bishop turned to Mason. Your father always said the road never ends. It just changes direction. Mason opened the urn and let the wind take the ashes. The dust swirled high into the sunlight, not vanishing, just blending with the horizon. After the ride, the brothers gathered around the fire pit behind the clubhouse. The desert night was quiet again, stars bright enough to light the sand. Bishop stood, holding a small box. Iron Jack left this with me years ago, he said. Said to give it to his blood if he ever showed up. He handed it to Mason. Inside lay a worn silver ring with a crack through the center, his mother's ring, and a folded note. Mason opened it, hands shaking. If you're reading this, kid, I finally did one thing right. I know I can't undo the years I missed, but I can give you what I built. Not the bikes, not the patch, but the people. You'll find more family here than in any name or bloodline. Just remember one thing. The world will judge you by the jacket on your back, but only you can decide what it means. Mason slipped the ring onto a chain around his neck and wiped his eyes. He always carried guilt, Bishop said softly. But he died knowing you forgave him. Mason looked at the flames. I'm not sure I did, Bishop smiled faintly. Then ride with us long enough, kid. You'll figure out forgiveness isn't a word, it's a road. Weeks passed and Mason stayed at the clubhouse. He learned to ride on his father's rebuilt Harley, the same one that had been found broken beside that diner. The brothers helped him restore it piece by piece until the chrome shone again, the tank freshly painted with his father's nickname, Iron Jack. But Mason had a vision. One night, sitting outside with Bishop, he said, I want to do something more with this place. Something that matters. Bishop tilted his head. Like what? Mason stared out at the empty road. Every day I see people drive past like they can't be bothered to stop. I was one of them once. My dad was too. I don't want that to be the story anymore. I want this club to stand for something better, Bishop smirked. You mean like charity work? Mason nodded. Yeah, bikes for veterans. Food runs for single moms. Fixing cars for free for anyone down on luck. We'll keep the name, but change what it means. The old biker laughed, deep, genuine. "You sound just like your father when he first built this club." He said, "The patch should scare the wicked and comfort the broken. Maybe it's time we made that true again." A month later, the people of Ironvale saw something they never expected. The hellsangels cleaning the community park. Rough men with tattoos painting fences, delivering groceries to seniors, fixing flat tires for stranded drivers. Mason led the charge, his father's ring glinting in the sunlight, his Harley parked proudly out front. At first, people watched from a distance, but slowly they started approaching. A woman brought coffee. A mechanic offered parts. Kids asked for rides on the bikes. And just like that, the walls between fear and understanding started to fall. That night, the club gathered again around the fire. Bishop clinked his bottle against Mason's. "You did it, kid. You changed how they see us." Mason looked at the stars, the desert wind warm against his face. "No," he said, "he did. I'm just finishing his ride." The engines roared to life once more, flames reflecting off chrome as they rode out into the night. Not as outlaws, not as ghosts, but as guardians of the road. For the first time, Ironvale slept peacefully under the sound of Harleys, because everyone finally understood. Sometimes the angels you need don't have halos. Sometimes they ride Harleys. A year passed. The desert seasons came and went, and so did the ghosts of the past. The hellsangels of Ironvale weren't the same club anymore. The chrome still gleamed, the jackets still carried wings, but the purpose had changed. Mason, now 17, had grown into his father's boots faster than anyone expected. He spoke less, worked harder, and rode with the same quiet strength Iron Jack was known for. But there was one thing he hadn't done yet. His first solo ride, wearing his father's patch. The brothers had been, waiting for him to choose the day himself. "You don't earn that ride with muscle," Bishop told him one night, lighting a cigar by the fire. "You earn it when your heart knows where it's going." That morning, Mason stood in front of the mirror, the leather jacket folded neatly across the bed. The faded patch still smelled faintly of oil and road dust. He ran his fingers across the words Hells Angels, Arizona, then across the smaller name stitched beneath, Iron Jack Cutter. He didn't replace it. He added one line below it, Son of the Road. When he stepped outside, the club was waiting, engines idling, the dawn sky streaked with pink and gold. Bishop tossed him his helmet. "Ride safe, kid." "The road's yours now," Mason smiled. "No, Bishop. The road's ours." The Harley's roar echoed across Route 9, the same lonely stretch where it had all started, where Mason had found a broken bike and a forgotten old man. The diner was still there, windows cracked, sign faded, open light flickering weakly. Mason parked in the same spot, dust swirling around the tires. The old gas pumps stood silent, ghosts of a night that had changed everything. He walked to the side of the diner, to a small patch of desert where the sand met the gravel. There he placed a small metal plaque in the ground. It read, "In memory of Iron Jack Cutter. He rode the road so his son could walk it free." He knelt there for a while, head bowed. "You were right," he whispered. "The world judges us by what we look like. But you taught me that honor isn't how others see you. It's what you do when no one's watching." A truck driver honked as he passed, raising a hand in salute. The sight of the young biker kneeling beside that Harley had become local legend, the story of the son who turned his father's legacy into hope. By summer, the change was undeniable. Ironvale wasn't afraid of leather jackets anymore. The angels had rebuilt a broken part of town, patching roofs, fixing fences, escorting battered women to safety, mentoring troubled teens who reminded Mason of himself. The media caught wind. A reporter from Phoenix drove out, skeptical, ready to find trouble. What she found instead was a garage full of laughter, music, and kids learning how to fix bikes instead of stealing them. When she asked Mason what made him start it, he just said, "Because someone once stopped when no one else would." The headline went viral, "The Hellsangels, who became heroes of the highway." For the first time, Iron Vale wasn't a name people whispered, it was one they respected. That evening, Mason took the rebuilt Harley back onto the open road. The air smelled of sage and asphalt, the horizon endless. He rode alone, the wind screaming past, his father's ring thumping gently against his chest with every bump. Somewhere between the roar of the engine and the hum of the wheels, he felt it. That presence, that weight of memory that wasn't sorrow anymore, but peace. For a heartbeat he could almost see him, Iron Jack riding beside him on a ghost bike. Chrome shining in the sunset, his beard whipping in the wind. Grinning like a proud father who finally came home, Mason didn't speak. He didn't have to. The road said everything. When he reached the overlook above the valley, he cut the engine and sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He whispered, "Thanks for finding me." The wind carried the reply, soft as breath. "No, son. You found me." The screen fades to black and white footage, the sound of engines rumbling low beneath the narrator's voice. Most people hear the word biker and think of danger. They see tattoos, leather and noise, and they turn away. But what if the people you fear the most are the ones still willing to stop when everyone else keeps driving? What if the angels the world warns you about are the only ones who still care? The camera shows Mason teaching kids at the garage, laughing, oil on his hands. A shot of Bishop grilling burgers at the community barbecue. The club helping an old veteran fix his porch railing. Then finally, the plaque at the diner, sunlight catching the engraved words. Iron Jack didn't get to see his redemption, but his son made sure it lived on, mile by mile, choice by choice, one act of kindness at a time. If this story made you believe that second chances are real, that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when it matters, hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it.